If you have a look at the way the human body is constructed, you can see that we're very similar to all the herbivorous beings in the animal kingdom. For example, we have jaws that move from side to side. Only the herbivorous beings have that. The carnivorous animals like the lions, tigers, sharks, etc., they have jaws that move up and down. We have teeth that are, again, very similar to that of a herbivorous animal. We have very tiny teeth that are called canines, which are much smaller than our front end sizes, which are only the attributes of a herbivorous animal. If you look at an omnivore is a dog. In the wild, a dog would eat 80% of what it eats is plant-based foods. And in fact, the oldest living dog in the world is a vegan dog that lived to 27 years of age, and its owners were given the dog organic fruits and vegetables to the dog. So that is an omnivore. In Australia, we had a person called Cliff Young who ran from Melbourne to Sydney at the age of 61, who's been vegetarian for most of his life. But if you look in the world stage, you look at people like Carl Lewis, who's won more gold medals than any other Olympic athlete in history, and he said that he couldn't have done it without being on a vegan diet. Where do you get your protein? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's amazing that in 2011, people are still asking this question. You know, it's funny because protein is basically a product of photosynthesis. The only reason a lion gets protein is because the gazelle or the wildebeest was eating some grass a little bit earlier. And that's where protein comes from. The only difference is a lion is capable of transferring the protein from a second-hand form, which is a protein that's being converted by the animal into a tissue, for example. And it can make use of that. Whereas for human beings, like most herbivorous beings, we tend to do far better when we get our protein from plant-based sources. And in fact, you know, there's no vegetable that doesn't contain protein. There's protein everywhere. Even if you wanted to go on a no-protein diet, I don't think you could do it, because there's protein just about everywhere. Fruit have got protein. Nuts are certainly loaded in protein, as are seeds. So there's certainly no deficiency there. You know, the word protein was invented by a Dutch chemist well over 100 years ago called Mulder. And he then proposed that protein only came from animal sources. And then many years later they discovered, well, that's not really true. There are proteins in plant foods, but they're secondary proteins, and you know, they're inferior. And then in the 1970s it was proven no, all of the essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids are available in all fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, so you can get them in great supply there. But then they said, oh, you've got to combine them, you know, in a certain way, otherwise you're going to miss out on getting all of the essential amino acids. And now we discover, well, no, that's actually not true either, because you know, there's a lot of foods that contain all the essential amino acids, like pumpkin seeds, like soybeans and a whole bunch of others. Now, out of the thousands of patients that Michael Klaper has operated on, he says that he's always seen animal fat and cholesterol in the arteries, but never once has he found any broccoli or tofu. And he also became vegetarian shortly after. There's doctors like Dr. Esselstyn, there's Dr. Dean Ornish, for example, who's worked with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's now on a vegan diet. He had a heart operation back in 2003, and he nearly died from it. And Dean Ornish said, look, you know, you've really got to change your diet. And Clinton was famous for having, you know, all of the junk food you could imagine, a lot of animal products, and he's now cut that out of his diet, and his arteries have now cleared themselves up as a result. The populations that have the highest rates of osteoporosis are countries like Australia, the United States, like some of the Scandinavian countries. They tend to be the biggest consumers of dairy products. New Zealand's also another one. Whereas the countries that have the lowest rates of osteoporosis are the countries that have virtually no dairy, like a lot of the Asian countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, certain Asian communities. For example, the Bantu that I was talking about have virtually no rates of osteoporosis at all, and interestingly, about the Bantu women, they consume 1/10 of the dietary calcium than the average Australian woman, and yet they have some of the strongest bones ever tested of any population in the world. 1/10 of dietary calcium.